She flirted with another guy right in front of me, then told me I could leave if I didn't like it. So I did. My name is Daniel. I'm 38. I work in commercial real estate, and up until that night, I thought my marriage to Claire was solid, maybe not perfect, but solid enough. We'd been together for 9 years, married for 6, and we had this routine where every other week we'd go out for dinner, just the two of us, no phones, no work talk, just us reconnecting like we promised we would when things got busy. That particular Friday was supposed to be special because Claire had been the one who picked the place this time, a wine bar downtown she'd been talking about for weeks, said her coworkers kept raving about it, and she wanted us to check it out together. I remember feeling optimistic driving there, thinking maybe this was her way of putting effort back into us, because lately it felt like I'd been the only one trying. When I pulled into the parking lot, her car was already there, and when I walked in, she was at the bar chatting with the bartender, laughing in this animated way that made me smile because I hadn't seen her that relaxed in months. She saw me and waved me over, and for a moment, everything felt normal, like we were just a regular couple having a regular date night. We got our table near the windows, ordered a bottle of red, and for about 15 minutes, everything felt like it used to, like we were actually present with each other. She told me about her week, some drama with a project manager at work, and I listened and asked questions and felt like maybe we were getting back to something good. Then she saw him. Some guy at the bar, mid-30s, dressed in business casual like he'd come straight from the office, and her whole energy shifted in a way that made my stomach drop before I even understood why. She didn't say anything at first, just straightened up in her seat and did this thing with her hair where she tucked it behind her ear, a gesture I recognized from when we were dating, when she wanted to look good for someone. I watched her eyes track this guy as he moved from the bar to a booth near the back, and she pulled out her phone and started typing with this little smile that definitely wasn't meant for me. I asked her what was funny, and she said nothing, just a message from her sister, but she angled the screen away when she said it, and I felt that first flutter of something being wrong. The guy looked over, made eye contact with Claire, and gave her this casual wave like they knew each other. And instead of introducing me or explaining who he was, she waved back and shifted her whole body toward him, literally turning her shoulder to me in a way that made me feel like I was suddenly sitting alone. I tried to bring her attention back, made a comment about the wine being better than expected, asked if she wanted to split the charcuterie board, normal date stuff, and she just said sure, without even looking at the menu or at me. Her focus was completely gone, and I could see her checking her phone every few seconds like she was waiting for something. The guy got up and started walking toward our table, and I felt this weird tension in my chest like I was about to watch something I didn't want to see. And when he reached us, Claire's face lit up in a way I hadn't seen in months, maybe longer. She said, "Oh my God, Mark, I didn't know you came here." And he said something about it being his favorite spot after work, and they started talking like I wasn't even there, like I was a coat draped over the back of the chair. I sat there holding my wine glass, wondering if I should say something, introduce myself, assert my presence somehow, but neither of them acknowledged me, and the longer it went on, the more invisible I felt. Mark was leaning on our table now, one hand on the edge, casually invading the space we'd carved out for our date, and Claire was laughing at everything he said, this high-pitched, genuine laugh she used to save for me, and I realized I couldn't remember the last time she'd laughed like that at anything I'd said. I tried once more, made a joke about the menu being pretentious with its artisanal selections, and Claire barely glanced at me before turning back to Mark and asking if he was still doing consulting or if he'd finally made the jump to full-time. And that's when I understood that I wasn't part of this moment. I was just there. Mark stayed at our table for what felt like 10 minutes, but was probably closer to 5. And during that entire time, Claire didn't once try to include me in the conversation, didn't once acknowledge that this was supposed to be our date, our time together. When Mark eventually said he should get back to his table, said it was good seeing her, Claire told him they should catch up soon, like actually soon, with this emphasis that made it clear she meant it. And he said absolutely and walked away. The second he was gone, the energy at our table died completely. Claire was still smiling, still riding whatever high that interaction gave her, and I just sat there looking at her, really looking at her, and seeing someone I wasn't sure I recognized anymore. I asked who that was, trying to keep my voice casual, non-confrontational. She said he was just someone she knew from a few years back, mutual friends, no big deal, but the way she said it felt rehearsed, like she was protecting something. I asked if they dated, and she rolled her eyes hard and said, "Relax," in this tone that wasn't reassuring at all. It was dismissive, like I was being ridiculous for even asking. That word, relax, it landed wrong, because it wasn't about calming me down, it was about shutting me down, about making me feel like my discomfort was an inconvenience to her. We sat in silence for a minute and I tried to reset, tried to salvage what was left of our date, asked her about her week, and she gave me these short, distracted answers while checking her phone every 30 seconds. I felt like I was performing a monologue to an empty room. I put my fork down and said, "Claire, are we good?" And she looked at me like I'd just asked the dumbest question in the world and said, "We're fine, Daniel, you're overthinking." But her tone had this edge to it, this frustration that I was interrupting whatever fantasy she was living in her head. I didn't say anything after that, just watched her finish her wine and scroll through her phone, and I thought about all the times in the past year where I'd felt like this, like I was competing for her attention and losing to something I couldn't even name. The waiter came by and asked if we wanted dessert, and Claire said no without asking me, said she was tired and wanted to head home, and I just nodded and paid the check, leaving a bigger tip than usual because I felt bad that the waiter had to witness whatever that was. We walked to the parking lot in silence, and I noticed she was already texting someone, probably Mark, and I felt this heaviness settle in my chest that I couldn't shake. We'd driven separately because we'd come from different places that day, me from a site visit and her from the office, and before she got in her car, she turned to me and said, "You know, if you're going to be weird about me talking to people, maybe you should just stay home." And I stood there trying to process what she'd just said, trying to understand how the evening had become my fault. I told her I wasn't being weird. I just wanted to spend time with her, with us, the way we'd planned, and she laughed, not a kind laugh, more like a dismissive exhale, and said, "Doors open if you don't like it," and got in her car and drove off without waiting for a response. I stood there in the parking lot with my keys in my hand, watching her taillights disappear, and felt something fundamental crack inside me. That sentence didn't hurt. It clarified everything, because she wasn't fighting for us. She wasn't even acknowledging there was a problem. She was giving me permission to leave, like it didn't matter either way, like I was optional and always had been. I drove home that night with my hands shaking on the steering wheel, not from anger, but from this weird clarity that felt like waking up from a dream I didn't know I was having. The 20-minute drive felt like hours, my mind replaying every moment from the bar, every dismissive glance, every time she'd chosen her phone over me, every laugh she'd given Mark that she'd been withholding from me. Claire's car was already in the driveway when I pulled up, and I sat in mine for a few minutes trying to figure out what I was supposed to do with the feeling sitting in my chest, this certainty that something fundamental had just broken and couldn't be fixed with a conversation or an apology. I walked inside and she was on the couch with her phone, still in her jacket like she couldn't be bothered to settle in, and she didn't look up when I came in, just kept scrolling like I was a roommate coming home late and not her husband of 6 years. I went to the kitchen, poured myself water, and waited to see if she'd say anything, if she'd acknowledge what happened at the bar, but she just sat there in this bubble of complete indifference. I stood there drinking my water and watching her, and I noticed little things I'd been ignoring for months, the way she smiled at her phone, the way she angled it away whenever I walked by, the way she seemed more alive when she was texting than when she was talking to me. My phone buzzed around 11, a text from her even though we were in the same house, and it said, "You embarrassed me tonight." And I stared at that message trying to understand how she'd flipped the script so completely, how I'd gone from being ignored to being the problem. Another text came through a minute later. "You always overreact when I talk to people. It's exhausting." And I didn't respond because I knew anything I said would get twisted into proof that I was the unreasonable one. I went upstairs, got ready for bed, and lay there staring at the ceiling while she stayed downstairs for another hour, and I could hear her laughing at something on her phone. That same laugh she'd given Mark, and I realized this wasn't new. This feeling of being secondary in my own marriage, I'd just been ignoring it because acknowledging it meant I'd have to do something about it. She came to bed around midnight, didn't say goodnight, just turned away from me and fell asleep within minutes like nothing was wrong. And I lay there understanding that to her. Nothing was wrong, because this was normal for her. This was how she saw us. I didn't sleep much, spent most of the night thinking about the past year. All the times she'd made plans without asking me. All the conversations where she'd checked out halfway through. All the moments where I'd felt like I was chasing her attention and never quite catching it. I thought about how I'd been making excuses for her, telling myself she was stressed with work, telling myself every couple went through phases, telling myself it would get better if I just tried harder. Around 5 in the morning I got up, went to the spare room where we kept our luggage, and started packing a bag with enough clothes for a week, moving quietly so I wouldn't wake her, but also not really caring if I did. I packed my laptop, My important documents, my grandfather's watch that had been sitting in my drawer, and I realized as I was doing it that I wasn't packing for a trip. I was packing to leave, actually leave, and the thought didn't scare me the way I expected it to. I went back to our bedroom, took off my wedding ring, and set it on my nightstand next to a book I'd never finish. And I looked at Claire sleeping peacefully and felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no sadness, just this calm acceptance that I didn't want to be here anymore. I didn't write a note, didn't leave an explanation, because what was there to say that hadn't already been said in that parking lot when she told me the door was open? I grabbed my bag, my keys, my phone charger, and walked out of the house we'd bought together 3 years ago, the house that was supposed to be our forever home, and I felt lighter with every step toward my car. I drove to my brother Ethan's place across town, showed up at 6 in the morning, and he opened the door in sweatpants looking confused until he saw my face and the bag in my hand, and just stepped aside to let me in without a word. I told him everything over coffee, the bar, Mark, the texts, the ring on the nightstand, and he didn't try to talk me out of it or tell me I was overreacting. He just listened and asked a few questions and then said I could stay as long as I needed. I called my office around 8, told them I was taking a personal week, and then I called a lawyer my brother recommended, a woman named Ms. Holloway who had a reputation for being straightforward and efficient. I got an appointment for that afternoon, walked into her office with my wedding ring in my pocket like some kind of evidence, and laid out the situation in about 10 minutes. She asked if there was infidelity, and I said I didn't know, didn't really care, I just wanted out, and she nodded like she'd heard that exact sentence 100 times before. We talked about assets, the house, the accounts, and she told me the first step was to separate everything financial, protect myself before Claire realized what was happening and tried to lock me out. She was matter-of-fact about it, no judgment, just strategic advice, and I appreciated that more than I could express. I spent the rest of that day changing passwords, moving money from our joint account into a new personal account, documenting everything I could think of, and it felt efficient, mechanical, like I was closing a business deal and not ending my marriage. Claire called me around noon, 3 missed calls back to back, and then a voicemail that said, "Where are you? Your car is gone," in this tone that was more annoyed than worried, like I'd inconvenienced her by disappearing. I didn't call back, didn't text, just kept working through my list of things that needed to be handled. Another call came at 2, then one at 4, and by 6 she was texting, "This is childish. Daniel, call me back." And I looked at that message and felt nothing, no guilt, no urge to explain myself, because she'd told me the door was open and I'd walked through it exactly like she suggested. Ethan came home from work and found me on his couch with my laptop surrounded by papers, and he asked if I was okay, and I told him I was better than I'd been in months, which was true, because even though everything was falling apart, it was falling apart in a direction I controlled. After Claire's 20th call that evening, after she'd left voicemail after voicemail oscillating between confusion and anger, I blocked her number, not out of spite, but because I needed silence, needed space to think without her voice in my head telling me I was overreacting or being dramatic. I slept better that night on Ethan's couch than I had in my own bed in years, and when I woke up the next morning, I felt like I'd made the first real decision for myself in a long time. Ms. Holloway called me Saturday afternoon, said the paperwork was ready, asked if I was sure, and I said yes without hesitating, and she told me she'd have everything filed by Monday. I spent the weekend at Ethan's, didn't go back to the house, didn't respond to any attempts Claire made to reach me through mutual friends, and I could feel the weight of 9 years starting to lift off my shoulders. She told me the door was open. I walked through it, and now she was learning what it felt like when someone actually took her literally. The first week after I left felt like I'd been holding my breath underwater for years and finally came up for air. I stayed at Ethan's, set up a makeshift office in his spare room, worked remotely, and ignored the flood of messages that kept coming through different channels because Claire had figured out I'd blocked her number. She tried email, social media, even had her sister call me twice, and each attempt followed the same pattern: guilt first, then nostalgia, then anger when none of it worked. One email said, "I can't believe you're throwing away 9 years over nothing," and I deleted it without finishing because she'd already shown me exactly how much those 9 years meant to her in that wine bar, when she couldn't spare me 5 minutes of genuine attention. Another message came through a mutual friend, one of those "hey man, just checking in" texts that really meant Claire had sent someone to check if I was wavering, and I told the friend I was fine and asked them not to get involved, that this was between me and Claire. Ms. Holloway called me on day 10 to say the papers were filed and Claire had been served, and she mentioned that Claire's reaction had been apparently dramatic. Lots of questions about why I didn't try counseling or give her a chance to fix things. And I told Ms. Holloway that the chance to fix things was every day of our marriage before she told me the door was open. The next wave of messages shifted tactics completely. Suddenly, she was reflective and apologetic, saying she understood now, saying she'd been taking me for granted, saying she didn't realize how much I meant to her until I was gone, saying we could work on it if I just came home and talked to her. I read those messages once and recognized them for what they were, not genuine change, but strategy, words designed to get me back into a position where I could be managed and controlled. I didn't respond to any of it, just forwarded everything to Ms. Holloway like she told me to, and kept living my life in this new quiet way that felt strange but good. Ethan asked me one night over takeout pizza if I missed her, and I had to really think about it. And I realized I didn't miss her. I missed the idea of what I thought we were, but that version had never actually existed except in my head. I'd been in love with potential, with the person I hoped she'd become, not the person she actually was. Work kept me busy. I had a commercial property deal closing that needed attention, and I threw myself into it partly as distraction, but mostly because I could, because nobody was making me feel guilty for focusing on my career or staying late to review contracts. Around week 3, Claire's mom called me, which surprised me because we'd always gotten along and I expected her to take her daughter's side automatically. She said Claire had given her version of events, said I'd abandoned her without explanation, left her confused and hurt, but she also said she'd been married long enough to know there were always two sides, and she wanted to hear mine. I gave her the short version, the bar, Mark, the dismissal, the door comment, and there was this long pause before she said, "That sounds like Claire," in a tone that was sad but not surprised, like she'd been waiting for this conversation for years. She told me she tried to talk to her daughter about how she treated people, how she had this way of making everyone around her feel secondary, how she'd done the same thing in past relationships, and she said she was sorry I'd been on the receiving end of it. That conversation did something to me, validated that I wasn't crazy or oversensitive, that other people had seen what I'd been experiencing. The social fallout started slowly and then accelerated. Friends we'd shared began reaching out asking what happened, and I kept my answers simple, said we wanted different things and left it at that. But Claire apparently wasn't being as diplomatic. I heard through Ethan that she'd been telling people I'd had some kind of breakdown, that I'd left over a minor argument at dinner, that she was devastated and trying to get me help, and the story was designed to make her look like the victim and me look unstable. Some people believed it, the ones who only knew us casually, but the closer friends, the ones who'd seen us together over the years, they started asking more questions, and Claire's story began falling apart under scrutiny. One of her best friends from college called me a month in, said she'd watched Claire's social media become this performance of sadness, posts about healing and growth, and finding herself that felt hollow, and she admitted she'd never seen Claire actually fight for the marriage, just fight to control the narrative around why it ended. By week 5, Claire requested a meeting through Ms. Holloway, said she wanted closure, wanted to understand, and my lawyer advised against it, but I agreed because I wanted it done completely, wanted to close this chapter without any lingering what-ifs. We met at a coffee shop near downtown, neutral territory, midday on a Wednesday, and she looked tired in a way that makeup couldn't hide, like she hadn't been sleeping well. She started talking before I even sat down, said she'd had time to think, said she realized what she'd done wrong, said she understood now that she'd been taking me for granted, said all the things I might have wanted to hear 2 months ago. I let her finish, let her say her piece, and then I said, "Claire, you told me the door was open. I walked through it. That's all that happened here." And she got frustrated, said I was being cold, said I wasn't even trying, said I owed her more than this after 9 years. I realized in that moment she wanted me to fight for her, to prove she mattered by chasing her, by begging her to take me back, and I was done playing that game. She asked what she was supposed to do now, and I told her she was supposed to sign the papers and move on, same as me, and she looked at me like I was a stranger, which maybe I was to her, maybe I'd always been. I left that coffee shop, got in my car, and drove back to Ethan's without looking in the rearview mirror, and I felt nothing but relief that it was finally over. The divorce finalized 3 months after I'd left, quick and clean because we didn't have kids, and she didn't want to fight once she realized I wasn't coming back, that there was no amount of tears or apologies that would change my mind. I moved into my own apartment downtown, 1 bedroom with big windows that let in morning light, hardwood floors, and space that was entirely mine, and I built a life that didn't require me to compete for attention or apologize for existing. I started going to the gym again, something I'd stopped doing because Claire always made comments about how long I was gone. I reconnected with friends I'd lost touch with, guys from college who'd slowly faded from my life because Claire never wanted to do couple things with them. I took a weekend trip to the mountains by myself, something I'd wanted to do for years, but she'd always shot down because she didn't like hiking. Claire moved on too, from what I heard, started dating someone new within a few months, and I hoped for her sake she treated him better than she'd treated me, but I didn't think about it much. She'd wanted me to see life without her attention, wanted to make me feel small enough that I'd be grateful for whatever scraps she threw my way. But instead I let her see life without my presence, without someone willing to bend and accommodate and disappear to make room for her ego. Memory wasn't a reason to return to a place where I'd been diminished, and I'd learned that the hard way. 6 months after I left, I ran into her at a grocery store, just a random Tuesday afternoon, and she tried to start a conversation, asked how I was doing, and I kept it brief, polite but distant, and walked away. I saw her watching me leave, and I knew she finally understood that I wasn't coming back, that the door she told me was open had closed behind me permanently. She wanted me to see life without her attention. I let her see life without my presence. What do you think about this story? Let me know in the comments, drop a like, and don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories.